Hello, sir.
Yeah,
I know what's up.
Oh, this is for you, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Okay,
no,
then I won't mess with that.
Don't touch it.
And do what our... Yeah, come on up. How are you? Good morning. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. All right, everyone's set. Well, of course you're set. You've been sitting here waiting for me to show up. Appreciate your patience. Got a couple things going on this morning. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. For some of you, welcome back to City Hall. I know it's been a while. I'm joined this morning by Kirby Brady, who is our city's Chief Innovation Officer, as well as Patrick Hadley, who's the Deputy Director at the Department of Transportation. So this is part of our monthly media availabilities, trying to answer whatever questions you have, but do always want to provide a sort of a look ahead and maybe sort of spotlight various things going on here at the city that I'd like to tell you more about. And in that regard, we have a presentation about streetlights I want to tell you about. So it's a challenging time, right? There have been staffing issues, financial issues, other things that are a challenge to our ability to provide the services that I expect our city to provide and that I think San Diegans expect, particularly when it comes to making repairs of neighborhood infrastructure. I want to be clear, I have very high expectations of our city staff, just an expectation that we run the city extremely well. I think San Diegans agree with me in having those high expectations. To meet those expectations, we have been working as a team in close collaboration with our Performance and Analytics Department, which Kirby leads, and other department leaders to find out why certain things here at the city take too long, are not working as well as we'd hope, and how we can improve those processes to more closely match the public's expectations. And as I mentioned, I want to focus this morning on streetlights because this is actually an area of significant concern in the community. You may not have that personal experience, but if you are a frequent visitor to the Get It Done app, to social media, or to community meetings, this is a significant concern. And it was pretty surprising to me, not only just the long delays that there are in repairing streetlights, but how complicated this process can be. I think for the uninitiated, folks not as good as Patrick, we think it's just switching out a light bulb. But it's actually far more complex than that. The causes of a streetlight being out are pretty diverse, from being old, having damaged wiring, a daisy chain design. Think about old Christmas tree lights. One bulb goes out and the whole circuit goes out. There are a number of challenges that are there. The other ones, sometimes we have folks who are tapping into the electricity in the street light, folks who are stealing copper wire. It can be pretty complicated, and it goes beyond just switching out the light. This can often involve what basically is a minor investigation into what's going on, because sometimes we don't have the system documentation that you'd expect for this kind of asset. On top of that, we have vacancies that we need to fill in the department, and with all the construction that we have in the private sector right now, it can be difficult to fill these vacancies as quickly as we would like. So that means we just have to get smarter, right? We still have this challenge. We can't just sort of throw our hands up and act like this is acceptable. We have to roll our sleeves up and get to work, and that's what we have been doing. That's where Kirby and her team come in. And I'm going to turn it over to her now to explain to you how her team is seeing some success in prioritizing repair and making sure that every city council district across the city is getting the most important clusters of streetlights back online as quickly as possible. Kirby?
Thank you, sir. Good morning. So you heard from the mayor just a little bit about the fact that streetlights are of significant concern to all of our communities. It's one of the most visible pieces of our infrastructure, really speaking to safety. And so again, I'm going to tell you about how my team uses data to help inform the process and make things a little bit better, even while we're working with some challenges around resourcing. So you can see here just kind of the backlog of streetlights today is about 5,000 or so requests. And as you already know, it's taking a significant amount of time, about 272 days or so, for those requests to be completed. At the same time, we're working with some challenges around resourcing. You heard about the fact that we've got about 11 electricians now, and only about 18 or so budgeted for this entire work. And one of the things I think with all of you here, where we come into play is the fact that with Get It Done, it's a wonderful resource in the sense that it is kind of that public-facing application that allows people to report problems to us, but it also gives us the ability to really analyze the data and understand some of the trends that are going on there. So that's kind of how we make our way into this process. So when we look at streetlights, we want to know kind of what's going on. What are the things that are really affecting our ability to do the repair work? So here I want to just show you very quickly staffing levels over time. Dating back to 2017, here you can see that the orange portions of this bar represent the positions that are vacant at this moment in time. So dating back to 2017, about fully staffed, moving through to about 2019, and you see kind of these vacancies creep up on us. And what that really means is that we have less people available to do the work. In the depths of the pandemic, about 2020, you can see that we're down to those levels that we're at today with about 11 positions filled, 7 vacant. Again, a massive amount of work to do with relatively small amount of staff. So we want to know, and where my team really comes into play, is really understanding kind of, again, connecting the dots, correlating these trends and associations. And so here we're looking at the backlog over time. This teal line here represents the total number of streetlight repairs requests that have come into the system since 2017. The brown line here represents the volume of requests that have been closed out. The important part here to focus on is really the gap between the two, which really represents our backlog. So you can see dating back to 2017, the slope of these two lines really trending together. There was a backlog, but not as significant, nearly as significant as it is today. Moving through 2019, you see kind of that brown line drop off just a little bit. And what that's really representing, again, back to that previous slide, is the corresponding relationship there to the decrease in the number of electricians that we had available to do the work. And where you really see things start to get a little bit serious is 2020, where now you can kind of see the brown lines flattening a little bit, and we're seeing that gap open up. So really, again, here is the place and point in time where that backlog grew significantly, and you see that kind of persist through 2021 and into current day. So the question is, what are we going to do about it? And again, back to kind of where my team comes into play is we analyze the data, we want to understand some of these explanatory variables, what's going on, but then the real important piece is like, what do we do next? And we've talked about some of the resourcing challenges, and while the mayor and department leadership are working to improve these service levels over time, bring in more resources for this work, we're here in the short term to try to optimize the process, and we use data to do that. And so what we've done with streetlights, and I work closely with Patrick and Juan and the transportation team, is for every request that's coming in, what we really want to be able to give to that transportation team is some indication of how urgent or how high of a priority that repair request should be. And so this is where the fun, I think, of kind of bringing our and wrapping our arms around all this contextual information about the streetlights comes into play. And so, for instance, for every light that's out there in the street now, we know things like, is it close to a school? Is it close to a park? These are places where obviously you want well-lit paths, you want people to be safe and comfortable walking and traveling. We also would know for every street light, is it in a place that, is high density, significant traffic volumes, things like that would let us know if, this is something where potentially there's some areas around collisions, crime. These are things we can also associate with every street light. Historic service levels. Does this light exist in a place that has historically slow response times? Is it an underserved community? That would also factor into the prioritization. And then last but not least, just clustering. And so again, with only 11 electricians today, when those crews are out in the field, we want them to be efficient with their time. So we give them some indication spatially and geographically where there are clusters of lights that would need attention. And if they're out there and there are a couple other stragglers that maybe they're not high priority, but they're nearby, we're going to have them hit those too because they're there. And so when we do this methodology, the idea is that we're always pushing out current and the most up-to-date information for our crews to work off of. So they would have the ability to open up an app, look at the map, see where these clusters of lights are. So in this particular instance, you're looking at Pacific Beach. On the left is the before photo. And so they know exactly which repairs in that community need to be made. And then you can see kind of the after photos too. Similarly for Sherman Heights, kind of have a corridor there along Market Street. So before and after, making sure that they're getting to all of the highest priority repairs in that community. And so, the other piece of that is that they're able to take this information and balance that, making sure they're providing good coverage across the city. So as they're rotating council districts every few weeks, every time they get to a different council district, they know exactly where they need to go and exactly what needs to be done. So this is the type of work that my team is doing every day, but again, at the direction of the mayor, working to kind of hopefully expand this methodology and replicate this with other services across the city. So with that, good to see you all. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to our mayor.
Patrick, you're here to answer any questions folks may have?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I'm pretty good on streetlights, but I can get out of my depth pretty quickly, so appreciate you being here. In summation, obviously, we have challenges with regard to the age of our infrastructure. We have challenges when it comes to staffing, and what we're attempting to do here is to work smarter, to make sure that we're focusing our limited resources in the area we can get the biggest bang for our buck, where we can make sure that there's the best amount or the greatest amount of community benefit, and that we're addressing these needs as quickly as we possibly can, getting that number that you saw earlier of over 200 days down to something much, much more matching our expectations. This is going to be an ongoing process. This is where I remind folks that we are hiring here at the City of San Diego. We have recently provided pay raises for employees. We have been able to reopen our pension system to become a competitive employer with other electricians and other jurisdictions. We want folks to come here and make a career at the City of San Diego. And I know firsthand, I've seen electricians at the city who've worked here for decades. Their knowledge of our neighborhoods, how they're set up and designed, make them extremely effective at getting this work done. And so we want to make sure folks see a future for themselves here at the city and encourage folks to apply. Obviously, this will also be a part of our city's budget conversation process that is ongoing right now, but we'll be getting more involved in the weeks and months ahead before our new fiscal year starts on July the 1st. Grateful to Kirby and her team, as well as Patrick and Transportation Director Jorge Riveros for their work on this issue. We were here last week talking about the uptick in crime in Mountain View and Mount Hope communities. Again, driving resources through this team into those neighborhoods to address the streetlight outages there with an eye towards making that neighborhood safer. This is a part of what we do, and it's what we're trying to do better on. With that, I appreciate you letting me share that stuff. I will just wrap up by saying I appreciate the attention earlier this week to our Bridge to Home program, generating 663 additional housing units, all of which are affordable, many of which are focused towards our homeless population. I think is an important initiative. And then tomorrow will mark the one-year anniversary of the passage of the American Rescue Plan. I want to express our city's appreciation to President Biden and our congressional delegation for that passage of that historic piece of legislation. The City of San Diego received nearly $300 million from that legislation, which is why we have electricians to be able to go out and fix streetlights, why we're able to have police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and others do the work that's necessary in the community. The American Rescue Plan rescued our city at a very important time, and it will be paying dividends for the city for years to come. With that, I think that's enough of where we're at. I'm happy to answer questions from folks. So you eagerly waiting. How's it going?
Going great, Mayor. Going great.
Good.
So recently, the California Coastal Commission just unanimously approved the city's short-term vacational rental ordinance. So my question is, what are the next steps for short-term rentals, and why is a rental cap good for San Diego?
Sure. Well, first off, I want to thank the California Coastal Commission for their unanimous approval last night of our city's short-term vacation rental ordinance. I want to give a particular appreciation to City Council Member Jennifer Campbell, who led this effort over a long period of time. Others had tried and were unsuccessful. She got the job done and now has the endorsement of the California Coastal Commission, which means we can now put it into effect in our communities. What does that mean going forward? Well, next step will be that the city, working with our Development Services Department, Treasurer's Office, will now to start implement this particular ordinance. That involves permitting of a limited number of vacation rental properties in our city. That's a lottery that we've developed in concert with the City Council over the last number of months. We're ready to go in that regard. We have to start implementing. It means we have to hire some code enforcement officers who can work to make sure that any properties that are nuisance properties are held accountable. It's a privilege to operate short-term vacation rental in the City of San Diego, and that privilege will be revoked if you're a bad actor. And then the rental cap, I think, is important. Listen, we have an affordable housing crisis in this city, and the reduction in the number of homes that are available to San Diegans to rent or to own for their residential purposes is a driver behind some of this. The overall need for more housing is a bigger driver, but this is a driver. And so to the extent that we're going to be able to put a number of units back on the rental market for use by everyday San Diegans, I think is a good thing. And a part of why this now has been endorsed by the Coastal Commission, got a strong vote of the City Council, and now hopefully we'll put this issue to bed. I would point out that many other cities have long since addressed their short-term vacation rental challenges. It's taken our city a bit longer, but the day has now come. And so exactly to your question, now's the time to implement. My administration is prepared to implement this ordinance and do it citywide. Oh, forgive me.
For the online folks.
Of course, for folks online, you probably surmised it was Coastal Commission approval of the vacation rental. What's next, and why is the cap good for San Diego?
The city's climate action plan, which you helped write, calls for a lot less reliant on vehicles and more reliant on bikes and walking and transit. Is this gas price crisis maybe an opportunity to encourage folks? I know it's negative for a lot of people, but to encourage folks an opportunity to maybe try transit instead of paying $6 a gallon. And maybe can government play a role in that? Maybe you could lobby Sandag to make transit free for the next 3 weeks, so people are encouraged to try it. Because in your long-term plans, it seems like you're hoping people start trying it at some point. Maybe the new line in La Jolla. So is that something where government can get involved and maybe make transit more appealing, so folks are willing to try it?
Well, so question was about gas prices and how that might relate to our climate action plan, and perhaps incentivize or encourage people to take alternative forms of transportation. I don't like that term, by the way. It's just a different form, Anyway, so here's the thing. First off, gas prices is terrible. By the way, not great for the city. We have a fleet of vehicles. We're increasingly having more hybrid and electric vehicles, but these increases impact us and our ability to be able to afford to provide the service levels that we want. So this is bad for absolutely everybody. This would not be how I would want to encourage folks to make a mode share shift to walking, biking, or public transit. That said, I suspect that many people will make that practical decision on their own simply because it's what their budgets will demand. Should we make it easier for folks? Absolutely. But I think the true driver behind this is making it safe and competitive, right? I think in the case of certainly bicycling in many parts of our city, it is not as safe as an average commuter would want or expect it to be. And so that's on the city to provide the infrastructure to make it safer. You've seen us take steps all across certainly our sort of inner urban circle, downtown, uptown, mid-city, things like the Pershing Bikeway, 30th Street Bikeway, the downtown mobility plan. We're implementing those to create the safety that people would expect. And with regard to fares, you may know that as vice chair of the Sandag board, last year we voted to provide free transit passes to youth in our city. We'll be implementing that relatively soon. That may help people make this shift. But ultimately, you got to be able to get to work on time. You got to be able to get to school on time, do it relatively conveniently. And that's going to require us to continue to build out our network. Things like the recently dedicated extension of the Blue Line up to UCSD and the VA hospital. That's how you do it, I think probably more so than gas prices, although, again, they're horrible and they will certainly cause some people to make a shift. Ultimately, they have to be able to shift to something that gets them to work on time and does it in a way that's convenient and safe. And we have a lot of work to do when it comes to doing that. That's the essential. It's a key component of the climate action plan is to provide more incentive for the city to work on those particular projects that they'll achieve that mode share shift. Priya.
Back to the short-term rental cap.
Yeah.
There had been timelines estimating that this could go into effect in the fall. Is that a realistic timeline? Can we go a little bit more into depth about how the lottery process might work? I know that there was prioritization given to existing short-term rental people who hadn't had any complaints, if I'm understanding it correctly.
That's correct. I may need to refer you to Development Services and Treasurer's Office because this is very specific stuff. But yes, you're correct. The City Council provided very clear direction that as we perform the lottery for vacation rental permits, that consideration of past performance, past behavior be taken into account. What does that mean? Paying your TOT, not having a lot of calls for public safety response, things of that nature. I believe we can do that. And to your question about are we on track to be able to implement this, I believe that we are. We gave ourselves a little bit more time because we were unsure if the Coastal Commission's decision yesterday was going to be as decisive as it was. It was. And so that gives us some certainty going forward that the ordinance that we have from the City Council that's now been endorsed by the state is something that we can rely upon and then start issuing the rules, start working through the lottery, start issuing the permits, start having the staff to actually do this work. The ordinance envisions having essentially around-the-clock enforcement of this by code compliance. That's going to be a challenge. That's going to require staffing, vehicles, et cetera. And so we're in the process of doing all that. What I will tell you is that, regardless of the timing, we were anticipating the passage of this. And so whether that's budgeting the positions, working through the Civil Service Commission to have the positions prepared so that we can actually now start recruiting for them. This is the work that my administration has been doing to get underway. Yesterday's vote provides us the certainty and the clarity for what we can do going forward, and we need to do this relatively quickly. It's time to get past this issue. Again, as I mentioned before, other cities have dealt with this years ago. We took the long road to get there, but we have now arrived. Let's actually implement this thing and then start holding folks accountable going forward. I suspect that going forward you will find certain folks will end up with a permit and they may not be good actors. We'll look forward to holding them accountable. And we'll have some period of education that we'll need to do, particularly for folks who may live near or adjacent to vacation rental, understanding what the expectations are under the ordinance and how they can help the city hold these folks accountable who get the privilege of operating a vacation rental in our city. But yes, I think that time frame is still pretty bankable. If you have follow-up questions, happy to get you in touch with our staff. And I would also encourage you to chat with Councilmember Campbell, who really did broker the agreement that got us past the sort of binary, can't ever get anything done, chasing our tail situation, to actually delivering for our entire city, but particularly for our constituents in the beach community who are heavily impacted by this issue. Who else? All right. Good morning.
I want to ask you about 2 weeks ago there was a closed session. City Council, the only thing on the agenda were the 3 lawsuits regarding 101 Ash. Without violating the confidentiality of one of the closed session, sources tell us that the proposal that was discussed was proposed by the COO, who reports to you. Can you confirm, without violating what was discussed in closed session, that would imply that your office is now driving the discussions on a settlement? Can you confirm that the COO is the one that made the proposal at your direction? And 2, a bigger question about 101, it's now been vacant for 2 years. Why has the city just walked away, handed the keys back, and gone through the eviction process? And because you're already in court trying to invalidate the lease, but the city still continues to have the cost and liability of the building. If it burns down today, it's a city liability. So it's a 2-part question. Can you confirm that it is your office driving the discussion, not the city attorney? And 2, why have you just walked away?
So I can't comment on closed session, and if you want to share sources, let me know. Because
what they talked about, but he reports to you. Unless the COO went rogue and made his own proposal, is that a proposal coming from your office?
So I will not comment on issues of closed session. With regard to ownership, this is a matter of active litigation, and obviously there are folks who participate in a transaction of which we're in active litigation. It was the subject of the closed session, as noticed in by the Brown Act, and my hope is that we can resolve this matter in a way that holds people accountable for their past actions, as well as does right by the taxpayers. I've said very clearly this was not a good deal, and we're actively trying to work on that, but it is an extremely complex matter, not just the acquisition of the building, but the modifications that were made since then by the city that complicates some of what you're asking about. Yeah. Good morning.
In the past, just kind of talking, moving on towards the situation that's happening in Russia and Ukraine situation, we know that in the past we have voiced your those kind of migrants seeking asylum here in San Diego, coming from Mexico. We are learning that Ukrainian families are doing the same, trying to find safety here in San Diego, so they are being stopped by border control and at our port of entry. It's kind of, what are your thoughts as far as those seeking safety here in San Diego, and could the city be doing anything to help them?
I appreciate the question. So for the folks online, the question was about Ukraine, about Ukrainian people who are now presenting at our border here in San Diego County, and not necessarily being permitted to enter the United States, and kind of what do I think about that? What can we be doing about that? First off, I think it's been somewhat reported, but I think it's worth mentioning that there are about 4,000 Ukrainian Americans in the city of San Diego, about 8,000 in our county, so we have a sizable community here. Our city, I would encourage San Diegans to reach out to their neighbors. The visuals that we're getting from Ukraine are extremely disturbing, and my hearts are with our city's heart is with the folks in Ukraine who are fighting for democracy, fighting back against Russian aggression and invasion. But I'm also thinking about folks here in our city who this is a very personal experience for them, right? They likely have family members that are still there. They're probably wondering about their well-being, and I imagine that's really difficult. And so I'd ask our fellow San Diegans to reach out to your neighbors, try and provide comfort and support. We all want to find ways to support the people of Ukraine. We've done that in symbolic ways, lighting up many of our city's iconic structures to celebrate the people of Ukraine, to show our city's solidarity. But I know folks want to do more. The House of Ukraine in Balboa Park has been leading an effort around fundraising and supply drives. There's other small businesses that are selling items for supporting the Ukraine. So there's all that. To your question about immigration, I've seen some of the reports of folks being stopped at the border. I think, from my understanding, that's a reflection of some existing policies around like Title 42 and other policies that the city or I have spoken out as asking for those to be repealed. The Biden-Harris administration has been very receptive to our calls for modifications for border policies. You saw that last year when they lifted the restrictions on non-essential travel across our border, but things like Title 42 continue to exist. Again, I believe that should be repealed. That's a subject of ongoing litigation and other issues, and a lot of it's above my pay grade. At the end of the day, I'm extremely supportive of humane border policies that acknowledge people's rights under international law as refugees, as asylum seekers, to be able to exercise those rights, and that includes folks from Mexico, Central America, Africa, and from Eastern Europe. We see all kinds of folks down at our border from all around the world, and we are a city that has an adopted welcoming policy, unanimously adopted by the City Council. We try and live out those values every day. You saw it last year when we opened our convention center for several months, welcoming children, mostly young women from Central America, housed them successfully and reconnected them with family members and sponsors. We'll stand ready to support wherever we have to, wherever we're asked to do. There's certainly a significant amount of Afghan refugees that are currently being resettled in our county, and my hat's off to the organizations that make up the network of providers, both public and nonprofit partners who are doing this work. They are not necessarily the best resourced, but they do the work, I would argue, better than almost any other community. They make us really proud, but they are certainly weighing the increasing numbers of folks from traditional receiving countries of origin to new ones like Afghanistan, like Ukraine, and we'll just do our level best as San Diegans to be able to support whomever is permitted in legally into the United States. But I do think that some of these policies that really predate the current administration but are the subject of litigation and therefore kind of complex for how do you deal with it on a go-forward basis, I'll continue to be a voice for humanity, for compassion, and with gratitude to the fact that we have an administration that actually will listen to that, and where they're able to act will actually take action. Anyone else? Good enough. Well, Lang, did I cover it all? Is there anything we didn't?
Well, I think Jen Van
Oh, so, right.
texted me a question, and I
Sure.
think she wants to ask. I'm just going to give it to you.
Sure. She's the on Seaport. So this is from Jen Van Grove, UT. On the Seaport San Diego project, Port Commissioner Frank Ortassin said it was premature for electeds to weigh in on the project, and yet you reaffirmed your support after my story ran, noting some major outstanding issues. Why is that? So for the Seaport Village redevelopment property, listen, I think, well, it's no secret that I believe that we are a big city and we should act accordingly. And I believe that the project as proposed, or envisioned, I should say envisioned, on that property matches that expectation. It is our waterfront. We deserve a world-class waterfront. And I believe a lot of the amenities that are proposed in that in the Seaport project match needs that we have, whether that is an amenity like a public beach in downtown, which I think is pretty cool and would be a nice addition, to additional access or investment in our fishing fleet, to educational opportunities and public amenities like an aquarium, public observation deck. I mean, these are components that I support that I think will be beneficial for the long term of our waterfront. Projects of this size and scale, and it was noted that this was a very large project. That is correct. Projects of that nature are not built overnight. It's going to take many years, if not decades, to actually construct it. And what I'm saying is that we should have a world-class waterfront. We should have iconic structures. We should have public public amenities and stuff that will allow San Diegans and visitors alike to enjoy our world-class waterfront. There's a lot of details to be hashed out. As the Port Commission noted, they have questions around financing and other things. That's fine. That's a conversation that is appropriately being had by the Port Commission. But at the end of the day, I want it to be clear that San Diego wants the jobs, wants the investments, wants the amenities on our waterfront, recognizing that the work that we're talking about today may not be enjoyed by San Diegans for a very long time. But much like the questions around vacation rentals, things around here can get mired and delayed for long periods of time, and then nothing happens. What I'm asking the folks to do is to sort of lean in, if you will, in making sure that something happens on our waterfront. What we've seen in terms of glimpses, whether it's brick, down at Pacific Highway and Broadway, the North Embarcadero Visionary Plan, the waterfront park, everything we've added to the waterfront has been stuff that people are really excited about. I'm excited about the potential of reclaiming the pier in front of the Midway Museum, the IQHQ development, and I think that the benefits of those investments shouldn't stop at Market Street. I think it should go on south of that, and this is an opportunity to do that. Details to be determined, give and take likely to happen, and that's great. But let's move forward. Let's not delay the progress, recognizing that even if there was a vote today, it'd still be a long time before we'd see those improvements come for the benefit of San Diegans and visitors alike. Any other from online? Okay. Well, y'all know where to find me if you need me. Thank you for being here today. And again, thank you for letting us share a little bit about streetlights. A deep appreciation to our transportation and Panda departments. Results speak for themselves, and we're not anywhere close to being done. As Kirby mentioned, we have quite a backlog going, but we're not going to stop, recognizing this is an important neighborhood piece of infrastructure. But I appreciate you letting me share a little bit about how complex it is. I wish that it was just swapping out a light bulb. It's a lot more complex than that, but we're not complaining. We're getting the job done. And keep watching this space for more progress in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks, everybody. Let's grab this.